Welcome to today's Running Shorts by Accelerate with Stu Hale and myself, Howie Martin. We've got some cool topics following on from last week and then some new stuff that's arrived in the shop. So if you want to kick us off with new bits.
Well, we'll start with some new stuff, and then we're actually following on from last week's talk with regard to heart rate. We had a really good question which we thought we'd just follow up and answer that. But I'm actually going to start with colourful socks.
Yeah, let's do it.
These. In Gingy.
Not gloves.
Not gloves. Despite the things at the bottom, if you haven't had them before or you're wondering. So they're actually a ladies fit, but I bought myself 2 pairs and they fit a slightly larger feet great. The reason is because I really like the colours, and I tend to find a lot of the men's socks at the moment are a bit blue and lacking the colour. That's just me, isn't it? And if you've never ever worn a sock with little pockets for your toes and wondering why, well, they actually came out the Marathon des Sables multi-day desert race across the Sahara even. And the idea was that it stops sand getting between your toes and giving a little rub. So obviously, basically just stops you getting sore feet or sore toes. And yeah, they work. They're really good. I've worn these forever. I actually got married in a pair, so they're great. They're made of, unfortunately, a very, very fine polyester yarn from a company called Coolmax, and Coolmax are renowned for their high breathe, high wick, high dry technical fabrics and fibres, and they do exactly what they say on the tin. And even in hot weather, I think they're amazing socks. I really like wearing them.
I've got a couple of pairs as well for longer days.
Love them, just really do. My favourite socks. In fact, I've actually got a pair of these on right now.
That colour as well, actually?
Yeah, that colour as well, yeah. Looks a little bit odd with my trousers, but you know. And then we've also got the Flamingo edition, which I can see actually Team Accelerate race members actually jumping all over because we have a thing about flamingos. So they're cool. And then I think
then some jazzy donut ones. So
yeah, I thought licorice all sorts when I saw those.
Yeah, I guess it could be biscuits as well. Some triangles and squares.
Yeah, they're cool.
Tasty socks.
But yeah, we love Gingy, great socks, and they're in store online, and yeah, if you haven't tried them before, we would highly recommend you give it a go. And if you come in store, you can get yourself 3 pairs, and the 3rd pair will do at half price. So nice little thing. The other thing that has come in, which is a little bit different, and we have the Hoka Crescendo
MD. Dang, that's nice. I think it stands for. Or middle distance. One of the two.
Middle distance, you could run a marathon in that. Now I'm showing my age again. That to me, it looks like a racing flat from 10 years ago when we probably opened the shop up. And now we've got a nice P-back spike plate on the bottom and space for stick spikes. So definitely training, light enough for racing, and there for a little bit of protection. With how much foam is there?
It's 24 to 26, depending on the size you get.
Yeah,
and then only at 75 as well. So it's really nice.
So £75, yeah, it's actually pretty good value. So it's actually a nice lightweight upper. They've described it as an anatomical fit tong, which sounds like someone in the market department's having fun, because surely a tong's a tong in all my years of looking at shoes. Nice and light, what you would expect a spike to be. Just so much more under the foot than when I started running. There was nothing. And if you got 6 mil, you were doing really well. So they say middle distance. I would quite happily run in that 10k on the track.
Yeah, definitely. It's the reason they've called it MD. It's a little bit more aggressive through the spike plates. It does put you on your toe, but there's still lots there. It's not going to ruin you or anything like an old school spike.
So. Very stiff, to be fair. So which seems to be a bit of a trend. So yeah, I think worth the punt.
And it's got lightning bolts on it, so you've got to run faster.
You've got to run faster.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's.
But the size seems a little bit strange on it still. Like I had to go up a couple of sizes, so I would say come in and try it because the fit's not quite the same as a lot of other Hokas.
Okay,
so it's one to bear in mind. Just if you are getting them, it's worth slipping your foot in first.
So, right, there we go, Hoka Crescendo. I assume we're going to come back to. We're going to actually try and get someone in who's worn these. The new Saucony.
This is Exodus Ultra. So it's very similar to a Peregrine of a couple of years ago. A little bit more cushioning, really grippy shoe, and slightly wide in the Peregrine. But just a good all-round trail shoe. If you've got a little bit of road to get there, they just seem really
more
solid.
under your foot than the Peregrine.
Yes, slightly more cushioning. It's got a softer foam through the midfoot, with a firmer cage around the outside. But again, people seem to be really liking them.
Yeah.
It's a good.
I'd like to get someone in a pair of those, and we'll get a user's test, and then we'll actually see if we can get it compared to the first version as well.
Yeah.
I think I know a man who can do that for us.
So moving nicely on to a couple of race results from over the weekend. We had Manchester Marathon, which looked like a good day for some people. Potentially slightly slower than last year.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Which is a bit of a shame.
But I think with London and Boston and Rotterdam all quite close to it, it probably dulled the field a little bit.
I know one day you're going to run a marathon. It's going to happen. We can see it coming. I mean, if you've kind of got Manchester, big city. Obviously, for us, it's just across the nines or across the peaks. You've then obviously a couple of weeks later, or a week later, you have London. We've not long ago we had Brighton as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
Which was good to see that resurrected. I mean, what would you choose? Would you just say London straight away? Because, or
potentially
would you think
Seville.
Manchester?
I'd go south.
Oh, you go well south, warm.
Yeah, not about cold.
No, but see, you got to stay in Britain. Which would you choose?
I'd probably choose Manchester as the first one. Dip your toe in, see how it goes.
Okay, and then say for example you're a little bit more experienced. The times are coming through. What would you then choose? Would you think I've got to go to London because that's quicker, or the times, the people are there?
I think you run faster there because of the people around you. Maybe not so much the course. I don't know if it's too much different. I personally don't have as much of a stake in the heritage of it like some people do. I think it'd be a cool one to do, but I'm not super enamoured by having to go to it.
I did London, I must admit, from that prestige of doing it. Great race.
Yeah.
Running around Cutty Sark was the best bit.
Yeah.
The finish was horrible because it just seemed forever down the embankment. But anyway.
Yeah, there we go. And then we had Boston, where the GOAT got dethroned a little bit.
Yeah,
didn't have quite the best
his
race.
day, did he? But it just shows as well, with all the technology around and just the assumption that these results are just going to keep coming. That the marathon is still the marathon. You just don't know what's going to happen on the day. Pretty close finish at the end there. 2:05.2 between 2:05.26, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 2:05 high.
And there was a couple of them around a few seconds apart, so I didn't actually get to see the finish yet, and I'm going to have a look at that.
No, I've not. And then Helena Beery won the women's.
Yes.
Which is quite a big run for a second ever marathon.
Yes.
To win a major.
Yeah, it's a good time as well.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest, of course, is Boston.
No, definitely
Very
not.
hilly. Yes, marathon, I must admit, if I kind of think from a heritage point of view, if you said, you're going to do another marathon, Stuart, I'd try and see if we could get into Boston, I must admit.
Yeah. And the point-to-point style of it's quite cool
yeah,
as well,
I like
isn't it?
that.
It's different.
But I don't want to run another marathon.
Yeah. It's 20 miles too long.
At least.
And then looking ahead, we've got quite a new race, well, a brand new race coming up in Sheffield this weekend.
And it's filled out.
It's filled out, it's full, which is the Steel City 60. So it's a 60 mile following pretty much the Sheffield boundary. So it starts over slightly north of where we are in the shop.
Yep.
Round towards Meadow Hall, through Rother Valley, all the way out to Dronfield, over Stanage, and then back. It looks quite tough.
Yes, and I quite like the idea of the fact that they've also managed to split it up so there's 6, you can have a team of 6 people or even 3 people doing 2 legs each, so a relay with 6 legs.
Yeah.
I think the longest leg is 11, which actually does make it very accessible for a club with a range of runners.
And the shortest leg been 6 miles, so if you've got someone who you might not fancy doing a 10-12 mile leg, they've got an option there, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So it'll be good to see how that one goes.
Yes, I've got to pop down and have a look.
Bro.
Got to pop down.
Which then again takes us nicely onto today's topic of lactate tests and kind of working out heart rate zones. Maybe if you don't have.
Yes, it was a question that actually came up twice with people coming into the shop who saw the last podcast, and then someone dropped me a note and said, "What's a lactate test?"
Yeah.
I've had quite a few people inquiring about them, so we thought it'd be an interesting topic. I started lactate testing and getting involved in it well over 20 years ago, so and people are thinking it's fairly new, kind of a science.
So should we roll it back a little bit? What's the aim of a lactate test?
The key aim of a lactate test for the vast majority of us would be to actually determine your training zones.
Okay.
We are looking for effectively 2 turn points in how much lactate is in the bloodstream. There's one that occurs, this is going textbook, it's a bit like saying everybody's got brown hair, which we all haven't, so there are differences between people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's clever that, isn't it? Yeah, but that's just age. You've got 2 millimole of lactate in your blood, which is a tiny, tiny amount. We deem that to be around the first turn point, and that would be your aerobic threshold. So that's the point you start coming out of what we would call steady state, to a point that you're having to work a little bit harder, slightly out of breath.
Big generalisation, where does that fall for most people in terms of speed? Is it slower than marathon pace?
Yeah, it would, for most people it should be slightly slower than marathon pace. For perhaps a lot of people it would be a pace that they would use for a marathon, but certainly from an elite point of view it would be lesser so.
Yeah.
But that said, with some of the methods of training that are around at the moment using heart rate and lactate threshold training, we're actually seeing a big closure of the gap between this bottom threshold and what we're also looking for in a lactate test is the upper threshold, anaerobic threshold, which occurs around 4 millimoles. And that's when things start to get really tough, really hard, and for the vast majority of people that would be probably a little bit under their 10k effort.
And how many millimoles is that roughly?
So it should be roughly around 4. So once we've got those 2 points determined, and we do that by, I'll explain the testing in a moment, but once we've actually got those 2 points determined, we can actually work out effectively training zones. And it's the most effective way of doing it because it's real time. And yes, if we tested somebody every day for a week, we'd probably get a slightly different result every day, but not enough that it's going to make so much difference to the training benefit of what we're doing. So if we've got level 2 sorted, so that would be zone 2, we can then work out what zone 4 would be, split the difference to create zone 3. And then for me,
again, sorry to interject, is zone 3 about half marathon if we're cutting between the two?
Yeah, it's somewhere half marathon for an awful lot of people. Again, for super quick people, it's probably going to be the bottom of level 4 for a half marathon, but then we're talking an hour.
Yeah.
We're not talking an hour and a half, 2 hours of actual effort. So slightly different, and that does come into play. And then obviously for me, and I know my fellow coaches do a lot of work with Paddy, who'll say the same thing, level 1 and sometimes even under level 1, that all important, making sure you recover properly from those harder sessions.
Yeah.
And we can actually work that through. Sometimes if we're more tired, actually dropping below level 1 is also a very sensible thing to do, particularly if the legs are a bit sore, which can happen, of course. So a lactate test, you've done one of these, so do you want to describe your experience as opposed to me just keep ranting on about all of this?
It's probably the most fun you can have in the morning.
You're weird.
Well, yeah. So you do a little warm-up beforehand, you start kind of roughly where you think level 1's going to be, or slightly below, if I'm right.
Yeah, first time round I try and go slightly below, but not by much.
Yeah.
You want to get fairly accurate.
Run on the assigned speed for 3 minutes, come off, have your lactate taken, generally from your ear, because it's where it mixes slightly better. Yeah,
there's lots of mixed science and ways of doing it. Some people will use a finger. I was always taught, and every test I ever did in sports labs was always, and athletes I was working with, again, always from the earlobe.
The speed goes up 1 kilometre an hour, you jump back on for another 3 minutes, keep repeating until you get the numbers. It's not a maximal test, so
you don't need to be.
You don't have to kill yourself, you don't want to be falling off the back, because once you've got the top end diffusion, there's no need to go any further.
No. It's also interesting with doing that, because you're measuring perceived exertion, which we use what they call the Borg scale. Sounds like something out of Star Trek. Trekkie will know what I mean.
1 to 10 for anyone who doesn't.
So 1 feels very easy, and 10 feels like just let me off now, and I need to go somewhere because I'm a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
So that's very individual, but we have a chart we use. We then take the heart rate, and then obviously we want a tiny bit of basically a drop of blood, exactly what a diabetic would do to take their samples of blood, similar size machine and everything. And once we've got that information just plotted onto a graph, and we can actually see what's going on.
Which Harry will throw up on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube, so you can see it. He might even post it in a post on Instagram, maybe, if he's feeling
Yeah, we'll
generous.
see if we can find a good one.
Yeah,
I've
just so you've got an idea. You've done one or two tests.
Yeah, see if we can find someone who'll give me permission to put theirs up, maybe.
Yeah, why not?
Actually, we need to do you again, actually. And then basically, the next question is for a lot of people is, well, do I need to do another one? In some cases, yes. If you're training hard, Harvey's done 2 or 3 now, can't remember. We've actually dropped your zones, haven't we?
Yeah, it was a great day when
down.
I could run a little bit slower.
But very quickly, you found that you were running back to the same speed that you were previously. It took about 6 weeks, didn't it? And it was sort of like, wow, I'm actually less effort running the same speed.
Yeah.
And since then, obviously, if you listen to the last podcast about how you've been training, we've obviously noticed that your level 2 is rapidly eclipsing the speed of your level 4.
Yeah.
Which some people might be surprised at, but that's very much the athlete involved here. So that's basically is a lactate test. We do them here, or I do them here. They're very straightforward to do. I spent about 3 years on the protocols learning all of this at Wolverhampton University with Greg White. To the point he basically just let me get on with it when we went across, and he was just overseeing it until he said, right, you can do it yourself, you don't need me.
Are there any prerequisites to getting it? Do you need to have been running for so long? Do you need to be a certain age? Is there anything like that you should be aware of?
Age is not an issue. Certainly, I mean, there's lots of work being done on youngsters now, and there's some evidence that it's really helpful, even at a young age, particularly with recovery, but it shouldn't change, particularly with teenagers, the fun aspect of running. It just becomes something that helps, as opposed to necessarily taking over all the time. Like I said, if you've got somebody youngster dead keen, perhaps it's a good idea. We already know that the Ingebrigtsens have been lactate tested from quite a young age, and they've been using that in their training to go forward. But that's one dedicated family. That was their sole purpose and goal in life, really, wasn't it? How quick can we get ourselves and kids? And you can see they have a joy of running. They love it. And then from a fitness point of view, if you're, I would say 6 months to a year's experience.
Okay, so you don't need to have been running lots for...
No, consistent running is probably a good place to start, but consistent running you've built up slowly, gradually. Want you in a recovered state when we see you for a test. We don't want you having raced a marathon the week before. Fatigue does impact on the results. Stay off caffeine for that morning as well, and then obviously treat it almost as if you're having a race and taper into the test, but we talk anybody through all of that. Test takes about an hour, including warm up and a gentle warm down, and then a chat afterwards about what we're seeing.
Yeah, and then maybe a slightly more controversial question: benefit of a VO2 max test at the same time?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
People used to work heart rates initially out from the VO2, and basically the zones were too low.
Okay.
And also what we're finding is as people get fitter, you quite often will find VO2 will actually drop because the efficiency of the athlete, you're not actually grabbing all the oxygen out of the lungs you don't need to. And then this notion that we need to run till we drop to get accurate, we need to know the maximum lactates. Why? You might do very, very elite out of interest, but for the vast majority of us, I don't see any purpose in that. Let's get the training zones, get the training right, and the improvements come. We don't need to run till we drop with these things. If you do want a VO2 test, I would actually say there's a lot of machinery out there that people are saying does this. I would still go to a university. Yeah. If you're really insistent on it, and you probably need to be sat in a cradle so that literally they can take you to the point where they bounce you off the treadmill, you just lifted straight off because you can't run any harder. People say, I'll do the VO2 and the lactate test on the same day. Again, yes, but it's one of those readings will not be as good as it would be as if you were fresh. So again, you're going to have 2 trips really to do it, or one very early in the morning, one later in the evening with a lot of recovery between. I never ask you guys to go get a VO2.
No.
I've done some, know some of the guys down at Hallam and talked to them about it, and they sort of lactate test is where it's at. And the fact that we get watches now that tell us your VO2 has improved. Yeah, right, okay, move on.
What it means is you're running faster for the lower heart rate.
Yeah, it seems to be. Half the stuff we've got on the watches we don't need.
Yeah.
I don't think. We need a good old-fashioned graph, know what's going on. I think some of the heart rate variability, which everybody's been talking about recently, is something new and amazing. That's been around forever as well. We've known about that for a very long time. Yes, it's all hints and clues, and that's about it, really. But lactate testing is where it's at. It's the most accurate way of working out your training zones. People do strike it lucky with some of the formulas. And again, most of the time doesn't really work. It doesn't work for my age at all. I'm nowhere near any of that.
Yeah.
And I know you're not.
No, definitely.
You're way off.
Got a big heart.
It would appear so, yeah. Little feet.
Little feet, big heart.
Which actually, did you know there is an optimum size of feet for 7.5? Yeah, there you go.
Just trim the end of my toes with that.
Yeah, it'd be perfect, won't you? Just keep your toenails cut short. You'd be spot on. So yeah, there you go. Well, actually, your feet probably are 7.5 because you wear an 8 shoe.
Yeah.
So probably there you go. Your optimum.
There we go.
Optimum
Perfect.
feet.
That's what.
Sorry, that was just a real side issue, that wasn't it?
Bro, well, I think that sums up why you get lactate tests, what they are, quite nicely.
Yes. I think so.
Any other follow-up points before we call it short on this one?
I once read in a book, which unfortunately is out of print these days, and it's a great little book. If you can get it, Serious Training for Endurance Athletes, Slee Maker. Some of the second-hand shops have still got copies. They're really, really good book, and he actually says the best thing since sliced bread, heart rate training. And I think that book goes back to about the 90s. Other books, if you can pick them up with good introduction, again, I suspect out of prints, but Sally Edwards' heart rate training book is a really good place to start as well if you can get a copy of that. Back in the day, again, all this the science isn't new, it's just evolved. But definitely where it's at.
Bro, and then finish with Song of the Week.
Oh, well, I actually came up with two.
Go on.
Am I allowed? And one is because we've got London this week and we've just had Manchester, and it's from the same band, Comfortably Numb. And also because it's a long time since I did a marathon, I thought Echoes.
Two good choices.
Yeah, and which is the best track? That's the point, isn't it? You have to go back to back later, I think.
Perfect, bro. Well, we'll see you next week. If you've got any questions, drop them below.
Absolutely, just pop the questions below, or drop us a message across to the store. And if you've got a topic you'd like to perhaps see us cover or bring a specialist in, we'll see what we can do. And we are looking for some special guests, aren't we?
Yes, so I think we've got one lined up for next week, which is quite exciting. Yeah.
Ooh.
So more to come on that. Leave a comment below, like it, subscribe, all that good stuff. Nice one.
Yep, see you all soon.
Ta-ra.